thank you both for being here, and thank you for being part of Quiet Before. Um, I will turn it over to you in a minute to introduce yourselves, but I just wanted to say a little bit about how grateful I am um, to be able to host this conversation and to know you, Keala, to know you enough to be able to ask you to talk about um, your life's work and these issues, because I think that a lot of us that, don't live on Hawaii have any sense of the issues that Native Hawaiians face. And the only reason that I had a chance to have a glimpse of that was because my husband and I lived on Oahu in 2008, 2007. And I had friends who worked for HIF, the film festival on Oahu. And I happened to go see, I can't even remember why, but I think I read the description for Nohoheva. And because I was working on it, I was volunteering, and I saw the description. I said, oh, this looks really interesting. I'm a born and bred New Yorker, and all of a sudden I found myself living in Kailua with no car and no friends. So I went to see your movie, and it completely blew my mind. It blew my mind that I didn't know anything about the community, anything about the issues. And watching that movie ended up framing how we lived in Hawaii for 3 years, and really like sparked my curiosity about what was really happening in Oahu, rather than all of the layers that um, mask the truth. So not only did it shape my time there, but it also really, because it was, I mean, how many years ago now, it went on to be really kind of formative for me in how I see community and uh, issues that are ultimately impacted by how all of our communities are treated. So thank you both for being here. Maybe Makaiwa, can you introduce yourself? And then Keala, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, Makaiwa. Or I'll introduce you, Makaiwa. You speak.
Well, aloha mai kako. My name is Makaiwa Kanui. I was born in Hilo. Actually, a lot of people are born in Hilo because that's the only hospital on the east side. And then raised further upland, 15 minutes away in a place known as Mountain View, home of the stone cookies, but the original traditional name is Mauna Hui Hui, in a land section called Ola'a. My parents are Bruce and Kalei Tong. Actually was, I have this very interesting life. I was raised with a family of fish merchants and fish brokers. So cleaning and cutting fish all my life. My parents still do that. I mean, they're getting older, so it's kind of slowing down, but working alongside my family in that way. Spent a lot of time in Aina at the beaches. We even farmed cattle for a little bit. But yeah, a lot of those experiences kind of shaped my life and my connection to land. And I'm grateful to be here as far as, and we'll get to talk more later about the artwork, but I think my parents taught me a lot about what it means to love land. And being that our livelihood came from the land and what the land produced for us and for others. So oia wale no. Mahalo.
So you already talked about Nohoheva. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a diaspora Hawaiian who moved home almost 23 years ago. Only time I went to school here as a child was I went to Honau school when I was in 7th grade. And, I was thinking about that this morning because I was like, oh, I don't know, when you're going to do a talk story, you always kind of think about things. I don't know. And we're talking about environment, militarism, Hawaiian self-determination. These things, they all overlap at all times. And I was thinking about, I know I'm introducing myself right here, but just to give you a sense of like a kind of culture shock for a diaspora Hawaiian, they do like the bugle call at some of these schools. I had never seen anything like that. We're all indoctrinated to be American and we all have to pledge allegiance, blah, blah, blah. But I remember me and my brothers, the first time they had school at Honau now, and they line you up outside, they ring the bell and then they line you up and there's a bugle call, like military. What do they call it? A revelry? Like they literally do the bugle call. They still do it over there. They were doing it a couple of years ago because I was in the area and I was like, I wonder if they still do that for the kids. And I heard it. So that's how strange Hawaii is in terms of, they militarize kids right from the beginning. That's not the only school that does it, by the way. I know somebody told me there was a couple of schools on Oahu that do it. So, for me, my being Hawaiian, I'm Hawaiian through my mom, Irish through my dad's genealogy. And it's always been I've always had a very spiritual and soulful and genealogical understanding of what it is to be Hawaiian. I'm lucky that I had, my grandmother and my grandfather are both Hawaiian, and I'm lucky that I had what times I had with them because I just understood certain things that I think a lot of diaspora Hawaiians might miss. And my whole family, most of my family moved back over here when I started school at UCLA. My father had passed away and then my mom moved home with the younger kids because I come from a family of 9 and I'm number 4. So,
Wow.
For me, and also I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And then I discovered filmmaking and then I went to the UCLA Film School. And I have this sense of kuleana, for me, that's like always where things come from. My connection to Hawaii, my connection to anything Hawaiian. I never fetishize it. It's not a game to me. I think my awareness of the truth about America and Americans with regard to Hawaii, I understand America. And I think a lot of Hawaiians, they don't know who their enemy is. And I understand, like I can look at a situation and go, oh, here's what they're doing. And I never make it prettier. I just look at it the best I can for what it is, because I think there's so much at stake. So, I think I'm really lucky in a way that I had that other experience and that I already had developed my thinking politically. I was very influenced by Haunani K. Trask. I was very influenced by Kalahui, which was happening. The Hawaiian Sovereignty Movement was happening when I was developing a political mind. And my older sister, luckily for me, was always sending me stuff because she already had moved back here a long time ago. And so I was politicized about being a Hawaiian. It was never not political. I've never seen Hawaiian culture or even Hawaiian spiritual reality as separate from the political and historical truth of our experience. I don't break it up. So in a lot of ways, that probably is like more weight in terms of being like somebody who became a story person or doing nonfiction, because I'm not looking to lighten it. I'm looking to just sort of express what it is. But I was just thinking about that this morning. I was just thinking like about how different it was to come from Los Angeles to Honau now. Like it was a shock. But I'm also really grateful. I'm lucky that I had that, because what happened to me, I was 12 years old. And what happened to me was as soon as my foot touched the aina, the tarmac at the Kona airport, every cell in my body, whoop, it was like it went whoop. And I've never had that experience before. But I understood somehow, because it was like the most joyous feeling. And I felt for the first time in my life that I was home. And nobody taught me to think that or feel that. That was my kupuna. I mean, I came to understand that later, right? That was my kupuna meeting me at the airport, meeting all of us. And I just happened to know it in a cellular way. So I think if I hadn't had that time, if I hadn't had that experience, I don't know if I would have really understood my Hawaiianness, you know, without, it was always a soul thing for me.
Yeah,
So,
I think that that was clear in your film. I think that that's why it's so powerful, because all of that is interwoven in how you told the story. Um, I'm hoping that in our time together, for people who are being introduced to the politics, the spirituality, the issues, that we can create a baseline for what is happening for the Native Hawaiian community. And I think specifically, it would be great if you could both talk about, this is going to sound like a 12-hour conversation, but the history that led us here, the sovereignty movement, and self-determination for Native Hawaiians moving forward. So that's what I hope we can capture in the conversation, from like a historical and political lens, but also like what it really, you know, the living it, the real life part of the story.
mhm.
So I had said to you, Keala, if you could tell Nohoheva in 7 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's so funny. And you know, about the little book, it's like that ended up being like another kind of version, because the history is what it is, right? But
So we should just,
yeah,
my background is messing it up, but we should just say that part 2, oh, sorry.
part 2. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah.
This is Keala's new book, and it's like the sequel to
To know
Noho.
how.
And Makaiwa created this artwork, which I don't know, maybe you know what, while you're talking, I'll find it so that I can share it in the screen.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think the thing about where we're at right now, and that's it's such a difficult question to answer that you asked. I just want to say that right up front, because I think, you know, and Makaiwa and I have talked about this before. As Hawaiians, we always want to be like, yeah, this is what's what, and we want to educate and share. And then it's like, how do you condense things, right? I think Nohoheva really does condense a lot of things. And the little book does too. Our history starts way before Whitey showed up, and then way before Captain Cook got lost over here. You know, the Hawaiian people, as my grandmother taught me, and I will never change that into something else and say we're from somewhere else. She said, we've always been here. The Creator put us here. Our love for this place, our genealogical connection to this place, it is literally in the blood and bones of us. And so everything comes after that. And all Hawaiians, you know, to whatever we do about it, we have this certain feeling about the place, because we do have an unbroken history here, despite the fact that there's this massive settler colonial population, despite the fact of the United States illegal occupation, which stemmed from the 1893 overthrow by the US. I never call it a US-backed overthrow. You will never hear me say that. The United States illegally took control of a nation state called the Hawaiian Kingdom 5 years after it sponsored, paid for, conducted the overthrow of Queen Liliuokalani's government. And the history that we're all dealing with now is, or, you know, the fallout from that is what Nohoheva is about. It's what our situation is about now. That's never going to be anything else until that wrong has been righted. I'm not sure, you know, people expect that there's some kind of agreement, that we're going to at some point make an agreement that, okay, this happened almost 130 years ago, we're over it. Capital F, no, that's not going to happen. No matter how many Hawaiians might sell out or assimilate in, you're just never going to get most of us to do that. I think they can generationally dumb us down through the university or through the education system in general. But I can't imagine a Hawaii where Hawaiians are not resisting what's happening. Sadly, though, most Americans, most people don't really know anything about that history. They don't understand that when somebody says, listen, we're talking about a nation state, we're not talking about a tribe. And I'm not putting down any of the hundreds of nations in Indian country. It is a different political and historical reality. You know, like as you see in the little book, like one of the things I mentioned about King Kalakaua, like I was just thinking about this yesterday, like think about it. The first state dinner at the White House was for him, was for the Hawaiian king. We had this, you know, we had embassies all over the world. And so the way Americans try to just sort of sweep us aside or shove us into the native indigenous corner where we're all going to somehow begin, you know, begging for a few crumbs, that just can't work for us because our reality, our truth is different. And that's always the challenge, to be indigenous and also be this other thing that we have to honor. We can't dishonor our ali'i, and we cannot dishonor our great-great-grandparents. Or in some of our cases, just our great-grandparents, my great-grandparents. That was their era of the queen. This is not ancient history.
Yeah.
So every shit thing that's happened here, everything that's been done to this place, you know, through the US military occupation, which is the largest military command on earth, is on Oahu, probably in history. That's how big it is. Okay, it's located on Oahu and it controls the entire, from the west coast of America all the way to Africa and India. That's a lot. And you know, between that and the tourism industry, this place is being raped to death every single day. And that's never been anything else since the US took over. And that's just a reality that Americans don't want to hear. They don't want to know that. Most people don't want to because they want to have the fantasy of Hawaii. That's so much nicer. You know, tell that Keala Kelly person to shut up because this is really unpleasant. But the truth is that's what's happening to this place. And so I look at everything as a kind of intervention because it's a crime. If you saw a crime taking place, you'd probably intervene. If you saw a rape happening, you would intervene. And I'm saying there's 130 years of that going on up in here. And that's not, you know, our response to that might change here and there because we're always having to do triage on things like Red Hill, which is something that Makaiwa can talk about, and or Mauna Kea or any other huge terrible thing being done, but it's all connected to the same crime. It's all an extension of the original crime. And I can't look at it any other way, and I won't look at it any other way because then I'd have to go a little bit crazy to do that. I hope that's a little bit of an introduction, sort of.
Yes, that was very concise. What is the statistic is that the US military owns 20% of the land in Oahu?
Closer to 25. And I don't know if own is the right word. What they do is they've done these illegal leases. So for instance, you know, big chunks of, you know, the Pacific Command, there's lots of areas that the leases are up because they've been there so long that the leases are up. The original takeover of Pearl Harbor was actually a lease. They'd actually leased it from the kingdom. They'd leased part of it. So, but then also you got to remember it's the ocean too, and it's the air. So everything's militarized. It's not just like some acres over here. And Oahu's only 640 square miles. That's not big. I don't even think it's as big as LA County. It's little, you know.
Can you both talk about how that manifests in the Native Hawaiian community's daily life in a way that is how it's unseen, but how their occupation and presence actually has impacted the community?
Makaiwa, you should talk about that. I'm assigning that to you.
Man, I mean, I don't know where to start really. Like military occupation is I mean, their presence is I mean, everywhere, even on Hawaii Island, right? There's Pohakuloa. That's like currently they do bomb testing there. Even while we're living and occupying and protecting Mauna Kea at the access road, like we could hear the ground shake, like when we were sleeping. That was it was really heartbreaking. Even when you're driving through the middle of when you take that road in the middle of the island called Saddle, you can see it. If you just step out of, like, if you're just driving, you don't really hear it, but if you just step out of your car, you can hear them bombing the land. And even in that area, it's Pohakuloa. It means that name means night of long prayers. So in the name itself, right, it's so sacred. And I mean, every Aina is sacred. So there's the devastation and desecration of the land that's like happening all the time. And then
Makaiwa,
continue.
can you explain for the audience what Mauna Kea, what is happening, what happens on Mauna Kea?
Oh yeah, essentially, they there's this. It's privately funded and also like funded by the UC schools and the UH colleges. They are wanting to build this 30-meter telescope. It would be like the size of a football field. They'd have to like cut into the mountain. There's like all these telescopes that are not even being used, that haven't come down yet. You have these building codes that you can't build up to certain stories, but somehow they get this
10 stories on Big
yeah,
Island.
they get this exception. They can build much higher than that. And I think at this point, a lot of people the cry has been like enough. And really, this movement has been going on for over 10 years already. In 2019, time is like all over the place, but there was that wave of folks who came together and was living at the Mauna Kea access road. But 5 years prior to that, there was another occupation that happened higher up at the visitor center. So there's like a group of people and core folks who have been actively resisting. And I think at that point when the Supreme Court was like, still, it's okay. And everybody was like, no. So everybody gathered together by the thousands and thousands. I mean, you couldn't even see where the cars started and where they ended when folks started coming together and just occupying that space. But essentially, it's just like protecting what Auntie Pu'akea would say are most sacred. And she would say, like, if we're gonna allow them to build here on what we consider our most sacred, Mauna Kea, there's lots of cultural significance to us. Like in our history, people would say that Mauna Kea is like our progenesis. That's like where we as a people came from. It's where the sky meets the earth. Like it's the highest mountain from sea level up. So, I always remember Auntie Pu'akea, she's one of the leaders of the movement. She would say, like, if they're gonna build on that mountain, we might as well like just lay here and die. If you're gonna take our most sacred. And so it really was kind of, a lot of people, I mean, it's much more than the telescope, right? There's so much things. Mauna Kea is like one drop in the bucket, There's so many issues that are happening all the time around us. But I think caring for our piko, right? Like that's our, like I said, one of our most sacred, piko is like umbilical connection.
I want to add to that two things. One is that when the movement happened, because it's been ongoing, actually, there have been people defending that mountain since the 90s, making legal challenges to every attempt to build new telescopes. This one, obviously, just massive, 18 stories high, so devastating to a very specific place on the summit that's located in an area called the Ring of Shrines. That's what white archaeologists called it. This just the uses for Hawaiians, but also just our genealogical, our creation, all of that, like she said, the umbilical, the pico, all of these things. And these are, Hawaiians, and I'll say this too, by the way, old school Hawaiians, they would never talk about spiritual stuff in public. The fact that we have to do that means that we are being challenged in so many ways that we have to say something. We have to try to articulate the thing, like me trying to explain like my first time in Kona. Like, I'll just say it because that's just the truth, right? But it's not a comfortable feeling because I know that people don't hear with their heart. And Hawaiians are hearing and feeling and thinking and speaking with our heart and our spirit. So it's hard to speak to that stuff. But one of the things that happened in 2019 is they arrested our kupuna.
Mm-hmm.
They arrested a bunch of our elders. And that, I think, when Hawaiians see that, I mean, my eyes tear up just saying those words. My eyes tear up. Like, it's so offensive to treat a people like that, to treat a place like that. And then after you've done all that, after you've already put telescopes all over it and you want to do this big, massive thing that isn't going to help us at all, it's never good for Hawaiians. Nothing that goes on here is good for Hawaiians. So then they went and dragged our kupuna off like that. And I think that was what really made the 2019. And the reason I'm saying that, the other thing I wanted to mention is the cover of the little book is this amazing piece of art that Makaiwa did, because everything she just said is in that piece. Like the heavens, we're star people, and the creator and the heavens, all of it is kind of like that beautiful little piece just kind of contains. I remember when I saw it at a show out in Volcano. I drove out just to see because I'd seen her name on a poster and I was like, oh, I wonder what Makaiwa's showing out there. And I went out to look at it and I just stood there staring at it for 5 minutes. Like, she really captured the essence, not just of that movement, but of the Hawaiian spiritual, historical, cultural, political story in that one beautiful piece. It's like even and it's the kupuna tent. So I mentioned the kupuna who got arrested. That tent in the drawing is the kupuna tent. And that's where the kupuna would have meetings, right? And it's right in the middle of the road and it's blocking progress, right? Oh my God, those kupuna, right? And then there's like, it's just the Hawaiian story is in that image. And I'll always just love you for having made that beautiful piece of art, Makaiwa, because it's our story. And it's a rare talent that can do that can take such a complex reality and bring it into that kind of visual form. I mean, to me, it's a masterpiece, even though it's just it looks really tiny on that book, but I just think it's phenomenal. And the kauna, and I maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Makaiwa, because you camped out up there during those months. And the kauna within that actual image is so powerful.
Oh, what was that?
I'm just going to see if.
Oh,
can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oops.
Look at that.
Oh yeah, mahalo. And even as you're talking about the kupuna tent, so that's actually where they stood. So right where they stood and got arrested. So right after they got arrested, and they got released, they went right back to that area, right back to that spot, and we're like, we're not gonna leave. And then that's where they slept, and then that's where they ate, and like you said, that's where they had their meetings, and then they built the tents, so that like they're determined, like I'm not, we're not gonna leave here. People kupuna from all over were coming. They were sleeping there. We're just so grateful to be able to be living in that time and place for me and my husband and my kids for the duration of that encampment. And we would sing songs at night with them. But yeah, these kupuna, they're fearless. So, and I think just a lot of us had that similar feeling of like, yeah, we had enough and we're gonna stand. And no matter what, there is some folks who did choose to continue to remain there. and stay even through COVID. But yeah, I think when I had created this art piece, yeah, this is like the center of our camp. It started across the street, but as like the kupuna tent, they would call it, began to develop, this is where we would have our aha, or our ceremonies 3 times a day. So every morning, lunchtime, afternoon, we would be here, and you see the drums there in the middle. This is where people would come, they would do their chants, hula, pule, prayers. And then people would come with their offerings. And so alongside the road, you see I don't remember the exact time that I did this one. It was like 9 months we were there, but over time, these different nations would come and they would offer their flag and their gifts. And then as the flags are coming, they would be erected onto the access road. And there was like, we had so much flags. It was lined up on the right, on the left. It was going to like all over. We couldn't really even hang all of them. And it was really beautiful to see just how many nations came to stand in solidarity. And so when they'll come and bring their offerings, some of them were long, like just so many groups of people coming and coming. Sometimes the ceremonies were so close to like the next one. But it was just, I think for me, just seeing, if you want to even think about Kalakaua at that time when Kalakaua was reigning as king, he had this ship called Kaimiloa, and I learned a lot about it recently. But he had the one and only ship of the Hawaiian Royal Navy was called Kaimiloa, which I learned later that they blew up on July 4th. But this ship was created so he could sail the Pacific and build relationships amongst the Pacific Islands to kind of combat Western imperialism. And I just feel like, oh yeah, that's so us. Like we're not one to go and try to take over. It's like we just want to build these relationships with these nations and like stand together. And it was just beautiful to see. I always remember like when Tonga came. I mean, there were so many, but when they had come, they like had chanted their genealogy. We have our kumulipo, our chant that talks about the creation of everything, starting from darkness, and names every single species that came. But they started to chant their genealogy, and then in response, I believe Kael, what's his first name? Kalekoa. In response, he chanted our genealogy, but talked about our connection to Tonga, and to show like we're all family and we're all coming together. And I always remember Tonga had said, we come here to stand for your mountain, but also like don't forget us too. Like when we have our struggles, like to stand with us too, because we're family. And I think it all comes down to that. Like it's indigenous thinking, right? Like we're all relatives, but even in our own homeland, like we're all relatives to like the soil and the plants and the people around us. That's like inherently how we're born. Like if you come to Hawaii, they ask, oh, what's your name? Oh, who's your parents? Oh, what school you went to? And then we'll always try and find a way
to connect.
And that's how we think. And that also is how it informs our kuleana, as Keala Kelly was talking about. It's not like I have responsibility to take care of myself, but it's always this constant awareness that I'm family with. If you come and you eat from Hawaii, you breathe our air, you have responsibility to this land. Wherever you go, it's just that constant awareness that we're related, we're family somehow, and I have responsibility to that and to act accordingly in a way that preserves or restores the ways that we co-sustain each other are interconnected to each other. And I think, with illegal occupation, militarization, these things kind of sever those relationships in a way, and makes us forget.
Oh yeah, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, right? Some of his most important teachings and are about colonization, and that it makes you hate your past, it makes you forget your past, it makes you not want to be that. And I think that colonization, if you think of it like as this spiked weapon thing that just keeps turning and turning and turning until, it's cut everything. And the severing, and this is one of the reasons I think it's important to do any kind of resistance in Hawaii, and any kind of story that can show the resistance and bolster Hawaiian courage to resist, is because it's ongoing. And the fantasy of Hawaii is that it's somehow in this past. No, it's ongoing. They're not done. And they won't be done until we make them be done. And the only way to do that is to completely resist it and take whatever opportunities to speak to it and speak out against it. And yeah, along the way, hopefully educate people. I think it's a huge challenge for Hawaiians. When Makaiwa described to me, I mean, I still kind of smile if I think about it, like reading the Our Rights to Self-Determination book on the plane, sitting between two haole tourists on her way home from California. And just this image in my mind of this young Hawaiian woman sitting between a couple of tourists reading this and thinking about, what, literally physically experiencing that reality that has brought on every Hawaiian, sandwiched between haole people, having our own story in our own mind and our own thoughts, like our own story that isn't about them. They're actually going to destroy that story. Every time they come here, they destroy it a little bit more, right? So
yeah, can you tell us what the sovereignty movement is, what it has been, and what it is now?
Oh, I don't know how to describe that, Makaiwa. I mean, I would say I'm somebody who thinks the sovereignty movement's been going on since 1893, but that's obviously not a movement when you're talking about a country. I think there've been, like my mom's generation was really destroyed by, their whole childhood was lies. Like my mom there's a thing called the Ku'e petitions, which I actually mentioned in the essay and also in the film. The Ku'e petitions is something that almost every single living Hawaiian signed to make sure that everybody in Washington, D.C. knew that Hawaiians did not want to become American. After the U.S. overthrow, there were 2 attempts to annex the Hawaiian kingdom to the United States. And a treaty of annexation has to go through Congress. There's actually a legal process, right? Like if Canada were to be annexed, there'd have to be a treaty of annexation. So they tried twice to annex Hawaii and they never could, because even the members of Congress were like, well, it is a country. They might want that back someday. And there were a lot of reasons, not just that, but they didn't pass a treaty of annexation, which is why we call it an illegal occupation, because it was never annexed, it was just occupied, and it's just ongoing. Just because it goes on for a long time doesn't mean it's something else, right? So I think that for my mom, when the Ku'e petitions came out, I think it was like in 1999, and I was, or maybe it was in 98, I forget. I was still in California. No, I think it was in 97 maybe, because I think I was still in grad school. But she had this experience where she went and looked at it. And it's got thousands and thousands of signatures of Hawaiians on this. There was like a copy of it that was displayed in Bishop Museum. And my mom, who had always been like not really happy that she had this really political daughter, she was like, why is that? Thanks for putting that up there, Makaiwa. She had gone and to look at it, and our whole, like a big chunk of her family is on page 1 of it. Like she saw names of people she recognized, like her own kupuna, and it radicalized my mom. And here she was being radicalized at her age because she never knew, because the whole system educated her out of that knowledge. It educated her not to look at her own history. So the sovereignty movement, as we know it today, the modern sovereignty movement started in the 70s when a group of Hawaiians tried to stop the bombing of Kaho'olawe Island. And that was really just like 14, 15 years after so-called statehood vote. And we also had the Hokulea. That's another big part of our, our sovereignty history. These things are happening at the same time. They call it the Hawaiian Renaissance because Hawaiians were starting to be proud of being Hawaiian instead of like my mom's generation being kind of ashamed, kind of made to feel less than. So what we have now is like 45 going on 50 years of Hawaiian resistance in a modern era of resistance. And it's gone through a lot of changes. Last year we lost Haunani K. Trask. And she'd already been out of the public for about 10 years by then, a little longer. But she's like one of these people who was hugely influential for generations of Hawaiians and how we think about being Hawaiian. There've been a number of people, she's for me the most formative, but there have been a number of people. So the sovereignty movement now, I mean, and maybe Makaiwa can describe it better, but I think it's like right now we're fragmented. Some of it's very cultural, some of it's very religious, some of it's very political. It's like, it's not, it kind of comes together and then things happen and it kind of loosens up. But it's always in motion. I don't see it as something that stops, and so there are new threats to Hawaiian rights, which is why I wrote that. And I do think the federal government is going to make more attempts at trying to federalize us and turn us into a tribe. And Hawaiians need to remember that that's never going to work for us. It just won't work. If I thought it would work, by the way, I'll just be honest. If I thought it would work for Hawaiians to become Native Americans, and if I thought that Hawaiians would stop having the highest rates of suicide and every kind of illness that nobody wants, and poverty and incarceration, and every kind of way of being that nobody wants, if I thought doing that would help my people, I would suck it up, but it won't. They want to erase us. They want us to end. And so I can't support any kind of a system that's going to just hate us until we're dead. We can resist that, and I think we can actually change it. But, it's ongoing.
Makaiwa, are you able to talk about kind of the loose structure of the movement? Like, are there key organizations or key people who have consistently emerged as leadership? Or is it that's not how it is at all?
I think I agree with how Keala Kelly was kind of describing it. So I think there's many different leaders and there's many different movements. And like she had said earlier, all of it comes out of, the overthrow of 1893. Yeah, many leaders. I think maybe I could like approach it in a different angle too, where it's like some of us are just trying to survive too while like resisting. There's capitalism, which I feel like sometimes I grieve that as a mother. Like I have 2 sons and I'm grateful I live in a multi-family home on the homestead. And I know I couldn't do it without, I could not afford my own home, right? Already, cost of living is a whole nother question, but I couldn't do it without the family support. But also sometimes I grieve that capitalism like stole the village from me. We've lost so much of how community should have been. And a lot of us are just trying to survive. A lot of Hawaiians are the one who have multiple jobs. And then when it comes to like I think like a lot of Hawaiians would love to be more involved, but it's difficult when you're trying to pay your rent. And the cost of living is really ridiculous, especially during COVID. And, I grieve with my brother and sister-in-law who they're trying to find a home. to take care of their mother who like has diabetes, and like, you know, it's just like really a painful process for Hawaiians to own a home. And you know, I think just all of that, just like trying to survive in two different worlds, that's something that's always constantly going on for us. And you know, there's the Western economy, which I feel like we're never gonna win. Like we're never gonna really make it. And to some degree, sometimes I feel like we need to like abandon some of our values to like make it work in this Western economy. And then there's like the indigenous economy that's very different. And it's like based on reciprocity. And so I think just, I can't really tell you, there's so many different leaders. The movement, it's not done. It's still moving in some way, shape or form. But I think it's hard. It's my father-in-law. One of the things he always says is, I feel like an alien in my own home. And I think that's really hard too. Even last night, it's all the time I feel like that. Last night, I just went to eat ramen with my kai, and I'm like, why are we like, feels like we're the only Hawaiians when we like go to a random place to like go eat. Like it feels like, you know, we're starting to become the minority in our own homeland as more people are moving. So I think just like, one, to be here is already a struggle. Two, is like surviving, but also like finding time to just care for ourselves. You know, that's sometimes that time is non-existent for us when folks are working all the time or taking care of their family, right? Like I caregive for my dad. So we have all these different kuleana, like responsibilities that we're trying to care for, but people still very much care about sovereignty. And then there's the education part, right? Not a lot of people have that access to education, which I think this book is such an awesome resource because it's, I tell people it's readable. Like my father-in-law just finished the book. He told me he read the book, and he, I don't even know the last time he read a book, but it's like accessible, it's readable. They don't, you know, Keala Kelly doesn't use super academic language that people don't really understand, which there's a time and place for that. And it's important, but I think education too is hard for folks to know where to enter in. There's how to like participate when sometimes like even just engaging politically still feels like another world so far away, depending on what generation too, right? So, you know, in some ways, yeah, we are definitely fragmented. And then in some way, in certain areas, as far as education, access, like language is proliferating more than, you know, I've seen in my lifetime. I was part of the Hawaiian immersion school system where, you know, it started from preschool to grade school, and now you can receive your entire education from pre-K through your doctorate degree, fully immersion. And that's huge for us. And now that people know the language, they can go back into our history. You know, at the time of the overthrow, you know, Hawaii, in that era, 1% of the literature was English speaking. It was the churches sending out newspapers from the Fran. You know, there's a few people writing in English, but like 90-something% was all written in Hawaiian. And with the loss of language, we lost a lot of that history. But now people are remembering and going back, and there's classes that are being taught, remembering our history, going back. And that also gives us more insight to the truth, and it informs our engagement in a way that informs a lot of how we do things. So yeah, I don't know, it's complex. It's hard to, it's not just, it's multifaceted. I don't know if that really answers your question, makes it more complicated, which is
no.
I want to say to what she just said, I feel like everything she just said right now is like this really more positive spin on anything than what I would be able to put, because I'm reminded, like, you know, I mean, that's the thing, is when you're in struggle and you're like, okay, come on, you know, I'll fight you. Like, if you're always like that, you forget that the struggle isn't really just always about that fight. It's about all these multiple points of resistance. We call it ku'e. That's the Hawaiian word. Ku'e. You stand and you fight it. You resist it. You resist the erasure, And I'm reminded, like, gosh, and that's one of the things about the sovereignty movement, 45, 50 years, like they've made progress. Those are the ones back in the 70s who said, Hawaiians need to have our language back. And it still took another 15 years, before it was actually like, oh yeah, people are teaching it now and you can go and learn it. So much beautiful, amazing, life-affirming work has been done by Hawaiians, even as we are fighting that other thing. And so it's just, yeah, it's not easy, but there's also these beautiful things too. And I would say about Mauna Kea and about her image on this little book is like, to me, this is the beauty of it, in those moments that are too rare, where we do come together, even thousands of us if we have to, and we speak with one voice. And that to me is, for me, that's the goal of self-determination. That's the goal of why I wrote that, so that Hawaiians will think that way, like, oh yeah, that's our normal. You see, that should be our normal. But then there's the survival part. So, it's constantly.
Using Kayla, using you and your book and your perspective, can you, I guess what I was hoping to like get was a map of the Native Hawaiian thinking around sovereignty. So do you think are you like the baseline for Native, the
For
community?
Hawaiian political thought?
Yes.
Oh yes, wouldn't I love to be? Yes, I am. I'm the baseline for Hawaiian political thought. If only all the Hawaiian people knew that.
What,
then all our problems would be solved.
Yeah. So so if you could just sort of tell me, like, what is like the academic community, where do they fit in? And then are there views that are more extreme than yours or less so could
Yeah,
you
I think we have a really broad kind of landscape of, what does resistance look like? What does sovereignty movement look like, even though it's fragmented? So like recently there was a group, and I can't remember the name of them, maybe Makaiwa remembers, we have like these kind of Hawaiian army kind of guys who were occupying some land over there, and I want to say Kunia, but on the Waianae coast. And they were like, hey, you don't have title to this land. And they went in there and they were like, not leaving. And they had to get dragged out of there. Then there's these other kind of more like, I want to say spontaneous almost groups that spring up around something like the fuel tank leaking into an aquifer on Oahu. And then you've got another kind of point of resistance. But it wasn't bumpy guys. It was, what's those guys' name? I can't remember. It's like something army. But so then you've got bumpy guys in Waimanalo. Thanks for reminding me. You've got the Hawaiian Nation guys in Waimanalo. There's all these, there are pockets, okay? The reason for me to write this is to hopefully get Hawaiians just sort of eyes on the prize, focus on this reality that we all have, no matter what. Because I'm not a member of Bumpy's group. I'm not a member of the Army guys. I'm not I'm a member of the Lahui, the Hawaiian Nation. And so in that sense, what I've done, and I did it with Nohohewa as well, but this is sort of different. What I've done is I said, hey, this is I've condensed the historical, some of the political, the contemporary, the old, the new. And I'm saying, yeah, we do have this thing. We have a thing called self-determination. We actually have rights. And that's not just a word. We actually have international legal rights. Like, we can do this. We can say we have rights to a plebiscite. We can go and do this. So we have to, there needs to be some unifying agenda to do that. We're not in that moment right now. But that's not to say something won't happen that'll bring us there. Because once Hawaiians, again, I'll go back to Mauna Kea, and I always knew that's how that would go. Like, once Hawaiians actually do see it, something for what it is, and they go, okay, we don't want this, there's not going to be a lot of discussion after that. There's going to be like, you're not going to put this telescope here. And so here's what that looks like. It looks like us stopping you in your tracks. And so for Hawaiians to be to have a kind of cohesion around, the one issue of self-determination, I don't think we're as far away from it as it seems right now. But I'm also not sure what's going to trigger that. But we've had 130 years of resistance, so I feel like we're primed for it. I just can't say for sure what that's going to look like. And I want to say that's what being in history is. We're in our history. Every living person is in our history, whoever you are, wherever you are. We all have kuleana to this world. We all care about, well, not all of us, but actual humans care about climate change. They care about what's going to be left to your children, to the kids that come after them, to your grandchildren who aren't born yet. Most of us actually give a damn. And that means we just need to broaden how people understand what that looks like, because colonization is an evil capitalist machine. And militarism is the right arm of that machine. And this is what militarism does to a place. It does what's being done to Hawaii. It does what's being done to the Pacific, the entire Pacific. Biggest polluters in the world, biggest polluting industry in the world. Second biggest polluting industry, tourism. These two things, hand in glove, like that's, so apologies for the inconvenience. And by the way, the original title of my essay was The Inconvenience of Being Hawaiian. That was the original title of it, because we're so inconvenient to every single colonial American thing out in the entire region. We're the inconvenience. So I think we should double down on that and enjoy being inconvenient and stop being polite to everybody and tell everybody who gets off a plane, do you know what you're doing here? A, B, and C. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. And find ways to communicate that the best that we can, because that's going to be what saves us. Nobody's going to come and save us except us. But it'd be great if other people knew about it and understood it so that they could support us as we do it, like what Makaiwa was describing at Pu'uhuluhulu, at the kupuna tent. People came to show support because I think people do care. If you give them a chance, they'll care. Most people. They just don't happen to be in the White House or Congress.
Right. Or in power.
Or in power at all. Yeah.
A billionaire.
Or a billionaire. Oh my God. Oh, don't get me started, And by the way, Jeff Bezos is in our movement now too, trying to, his money's getting in there. Like once the billionaires get in, I'm surprised Mark Zuckerberg hasn't thrown any money in there. So yeah, but I still have hope. I think that there is a chance. I just don't know what's going to trigger it.
So we're at an hour. We're past an hour. So I'm trying to think about our last, what we said was, what does self-determination look like? And I feel like you touched on that. Let me ask this first. Outside of the Native Hawaiian community, are Hawaiians supportive of the sovereignty movement or sovereignty or self-determination?
Outside of the Hawaiian community? What do you mean?
Outside of the Native Hawaiian community.
Are other people?
Yeah.
Non-Hawaiians.
Who are living in Hawaii, who are Hawaiian, but not.
Oh, I see, but not in the movement. Yeah. I think the answer to that is yes. I don't think it's everybody's on the same page. I think everybody's trying to survive. Some people do better under occupation. Some people profit from occupation. Some Hawaiians do really well with the occupation. So they're not going to roll up their sleeves and try to undo it. So there's that class of Hawaiians. I think that it tends to be the most educated class of Hawaiians who aren't going to roll up their sleeves and do it. Most academics, they're pretty comfortable up there in the gated community of the university. They might join in something as big as Mauna Kea. It's hard to ignore that resistance. They might join in, but they're not going to make it happen. It's always going to be coming from grassroots, maka'ainana, we call people of the land. Kind of, I guess, loosely would be thought of as maybe working class. So you know, the movement isn't going to come from the top down. It's going to come from the bottom up, and it always does. And I think it always will. But to me, that's self-determination, because I think self-determination is a very individual thing. It has to start with the individual Hawaiian, understanding that they matter. It matters to me how Makaiwa is feeling, what's going on with her. I'm concerned that her father's having challenges. Like, that matters to me. And I think I matter to her. And we matter to each other, all of us do. And if we really take that minute and we go, this is what's, I matter, how I feel matters. I want to be healthy. I want to be empowered. That's an act of self-determination. I always tell Hawaiians, how much water did you drink today? Did you get at least 80 ounces in there? Because you need to stay hydrated. I know what that probably sounds silly, but like, this is a toxic world. So please stay hydrated, because your body needs the water. Take care of yourself. The more well we are, the better decisions we will make as a people. So I think self-determination is not in any way, shape, or form divorced. The politics of it is not divorced from the physical reality of the Hawaiian. And so we need to make decisions about what's right for us. Check ourselves out, check each other out. Where are you coming from with that? If your only goal is to make money, you probably don't care about the sovereignty movement. If all you care about is profit, you're probably not going to get involved. I think I've found that most people who get involved are on about things more than themselves. So to me, self-determination is a very individual thing, but it's a collective thing. It's like she said, it's reciprocity. And aloha aina, those are not just words. That is a reality of knowing and being connected and from the land, and knowing that this is what's going to feed me. And what's happened is America has turned this place into just a bunch of condominiums. And 95% of our food has to come over here on a shipping containers. Like, millions of Hawaiians lived here for thousands of years and thrived. They were 7 feet tall. These were healthy people. In this tiny, most isolated archipelago on Earth, can grow anything. Why are we growing condominiums and hotels? Somebody please help me understand that. Why are we growing bombs? Right? We need to adjust to reality. People prefer not to, but we need to look at the reality of this place. And people with a continental mind need to stop coming over here. This is a finite space, and we need to take care of it and the water and the people. And to me, that's self-determination. What that means politically comes after just the reality of taking care of yourself and the place that you're living in. Makaiwa, I'm sure you have better things to say about that, but.
Yeah, Makaiwa, yes to, can you try sharing your screen? I think you have permission.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I just wanted to say that in our time there, I volunteered with Keala Pacific, and for whatever channels, we got to visit Ma'o organic farm in Waianae, and we got to get to know them and learn about their work. And we were there for 3 years, and it took that time to absorb and understand our human connection to land, to the sky. And when we left, I don't want to start crying. I feel like I'm going to start crying. When we left Oahu, I remember thinking that I was never going to stop remembering what it means to say aloha to someone. And that I was never going to forget that our connection to the earth, to each other, is very real. And, when we were in Oahu, there was a time of taking care of that connection and being cared for by that connection. And I was super sad about, I mean, I'm a through and through New Yorker. I love living here, and I don't know that I could live anywhere else, but I was really like sad and worried about the idea that where we lived, we didn't know, we couldn't, it's not easy to see the moon. And, you know, we lived in a place where every night I could go to sleep and see the moon. And the idea of not being able to see the moon because of buildings and because of the busyness of New York City was heartbreaking. And I worried for myself. So now, you know, it's been so many years since we've lived there. I've lost that. It came back to me in listening to you talk about, you know, what you lived through, Makaiwa, and what it felt like to be with the kapuna. Like all of that brought that back, and it has reminded me that I've lost that priority. So I think that happens to people. I think people are lucky to experience it, but as soon as they're away from it, it's like a, you know, a faded dream. And so when you talk about people being aware of the issues, and why wouldn't you want Hawaiians to self-determine, I think it's because we don't see the moon every night. We don't see the sky every night. Our feet don't touch earth for months on end. And so I think that it's hard to understand unless you put yourself in there.
Mm.
I wish everybody could understand that. You
Yeah.
want to share?
Thanks for sharing that. That's really beautiful and sad at the same time. And I think that, well, at least it reminds me of why it's hard to get people to understand. Because yeah, if you don't remember, or if you never had that, you don't know what's being taken from the Hawaiian people. And that's just a fraction, right? And I can feel you, by the way, when you're talking, I can feel you in my heart, you know? And if you think about that in this larger kind of reality, that first of all, the whole world is in trouble right now, and that shouldn't be, and I don't say that to gloss over your experience or mine, like the world is in trouble. So anybody who, you know, I think I use the word authentic a lot lately, you know, like if that's all I can do is be my most realist, authentic person, I need to do that for whatever time I have left on this earth, and stop with the BS and stop with what industries and media and technology tells me I should be paying attention to, and actually stop being distracted and stop being pulled away, because then I'll forget to look at the moon, you know, and I have it, you know. But I know what you mean. I was actually just thinking this morning, by the way, about something similar. Like every time I used to come over and visit my family, and then I'd go back to LA, and I'd be like, I remember once I was sitting on Robertson Boulevard at the car wash, and it was like a couple weeks after I'd gone back, and I was like sitting there, and I looked up at the sky, and I saw how far away the clouds were, and I started to cry, and I realized, oh yeah, the clouds are so far away now. You know, it's such a different world over here. So it looks like Makaiwa looks like she has to go, so I'm going to stop talking.
Do you have to go? She's like,
can she hear us? Oh, she is going. She's walking.
I'm just plugging into us energy source, but I'm here.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, it's like a totally different reality, right? To remember how to be connected. And you're actually talking about the sky even, right? How to stay connected. to the sky and the earth. And if you're in an urban environment, and New York is a blast. I mean, it's a great town. You know, I've never stayed there longer than 2 weeks, you know, and every time I'm there, I'm like, wow, this is a great city. And when I leave, I'm like, thank you. I couldn't live here because it's too much all at once, you know, but I do think that politically the problems are very similar, you know, between us and your average New Yorkers. I do think the problems are the same. You guys call it gentrification up there. Gentrification is just another word for colonization, by the way. You know,
Right.
it's like we're being gentrified to death here. So, you know, by this new population of COVID escapees who have made their way to the Big Island, sadly. But it matters, you know, to stay connected. So thanks for sharing that little story about missing the moon.
Makaiwa, do you want to share the work you were?
Yeah. No, mahalo for sharing that. I think that relates to so many things. Like, you know, even as I'm on this Zoom, oh, I disappeared for a second.
There you go
That's so
again.
weird.
Why are you disappearing?
But even as I'm on this Zoom, focusing on this screen, sometimes that's like a metaphor of how we live our life. It's like, this is my world, but then yet there's this physical space that I'm living in. And sometimes, I mean, that's honestly how it is with militarization. It's like we could be, you know, living in our own hometown, or not hometown. We could be like going to Walmart, or like going to North Shore or something, or driving through Eva, and you don't realize how much of the space is affected. There's, you know, fences and signs, warning, pipeline below, you know. I think there's different spheres of worlds that we're like living in. And we can kind of like block ourselves off to certain, like the injustices, especially when it comes to like tourism, right? And wanting to live in the fantasy. And I don't want anything to be a buzzkill to that. So I want to ignore the hard things. I want to ignore the houselessness. Like I want to ignore the desecration of the military, or you know, gentrification and ancestral remains being desecrated. You know, I think it's tourism profits off of the people living in that fantasy world and not really seeing the reality. But I wanted to, sorry, I'm indoors now, but I just wanted to share this art piece before I leave, or for our time is closed. I actually did this for Red Hill, the water crisis at Red Hill. And even as Keala Kelly was talking about, like, did you drink water? It's like water is not just a resource, right? Like water is ancestor. Like water is so tied to our identity. Like when you ask somebody who you are, that word water is in that. Like o vai oe, like who are you? So vai, like we're raised and sustained by water, not just physically, but spiritually, culturally. Like water is an important resource for us. I have a really close friend who's on the front line of that issue right now. That's like a prominent issue that I cannot leave without talking about, because it's pretty much the US Navy contaminating the water in this place called Red Hill. The Hawaiian name is Kapukaki. It's been contaminated for a long time with Pearl Harbor, the militarization there, and fuel has been leaking over the years.
Decades.
Yeah, but now the water is undrinkable. It's really heartbreaking that the military families, I think the local community was like, oh, they'll take care of the military families because that's
They
their
don't care.
families. But yeah, to see, it was really sad to see that they didn't. And just people getting sick, pets dying, babies. And so I just wanted to share this art piece that I did. I don't know if I shared it with you, Keala Kelly.
No, you didn't. Oh, Wow. Makaiwa.
Um,
Is that a painting or a drawing?
I actually did this on my iPad,
You show off.
but I just wanted to share this because this is like something that is
Wow.
crucial right now for us,
Yeah.
for Oahu, and for all of us really. But yeah, I remember at a time where me and my friend were praying in this area called Keaiwa. It overlooks the Pu'uloa, and as we're praying, there's like all these military planes flying over. But I think one of the things I prayed was, can these tears clean the waters?
Mm.
Can these tears clean the aquifer? Because, you know, at this point, you know, even as Keala Kelly was saying, you know, was talking about like this, the state, like the condition of our aina today is it's almost like to the point of no return, right? Like, how do you clean water? And so,
Yeah, it can be destroyed, right? Forever. Like Kaho'olawe will never have fresh water again. Maybe in a couple billion years, maybe, but I doubt it.
Makaiwa, where do you share your artwork? Do you have a website?
now I do.
Oh, good.
Thanks to Keala Kelly telling me I need to make a website.
Can you share it with me so that I can include it in your in the description for this
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah. So I'm not really, I just, you know, I'm not trying to show off, but more like, I think this connects, you know, this connects to Noho Hewa. It connects to our rights to self-determination. What happens to the land, we feel it, like, you know, Keala was saying, it's our blood in our bones. And so, like in this piece, personifying Aina, like this is our family, figuratively, but also literally, you know, the bones of our ancestors. And so just, yeah, thankful for this time. And just, I wanted to share that as a, like a, I think it's something to chew on for us later. And it's something, it's like a piece that I've prayed through for us, for me, and I dedicate it to my friend who's on the front line. But I mean, in so many ways, this captures a lot of like the lament of the land and the lament of the people.
Yeah, it does.
That's something else that we can be deaf to. And so it's painful. Like these issues that we talk about is painful, and it's much easier to be deaf. But for Hawaiian people, it's hard. It's more painful to be deaf. So I think just hoping that it's something that for whoever listens or watches this, that in our time of sharing or seeing, that, you know, we can hear and see better.
I just, you know, I want to just say about this piece, well, I can't say anything about it because it's kind of overwhelmingly intense. But I'm reminded looking at it, like Makaiwa is a once in a generation artist, as Hawaiians go. And you can see her voice in this. I mean, I'm just looking at it and I'm, you know, what's the word that the British use? Gobsmacked. It's like, how do you even, you know, it's, again, she manages to say it all in terms of our belonging and our connection, earth, heavens, everything under the earth, like, you know, our real experience. And I'm so honored that her art is on my little book, but I'm just really proud of you, Makaiwa, because that's such a painful rendering of the truth. So mahalo for doing that piece. And it's breaking my heart looking at it.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing it, Makaiwa.
Oh, mahalo to you folks. Okay, I'll unshare.
Well, thank you both. Thank you for being here. Thank you for a great conversation. I hope that we can follow up and do another one over some time after your book has been out for a little while, And as things progress, I'd love to continue talking.
Of course. And Nancy, mahalo nui for having us on today, because
Yes.
it's so nice of you to do that. And I mean, you're a wonderful human being, and I'm really glad to know you. And it's good to be able to speak as Hawaiians in Hawaii with people all the way in New York and wherever else they are that they'll be maybe seeing this eventually. So mahalo nui to you for including us.
It's totally my honor. So you're the one you're the one who opens the window so that this could happen at all those years ago. So thank you for continuing to articulate and put your message and that story out there.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Aloha.
Mahalo.
Hui ho.
Aloha.
Aloha.